Good morning, Campus Church. My name is Brandon. I'm part of the teaching team here, and I want to echo what Summer said just moments ago. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for hanging out with us on a Sunday as we continue going through our series, That You May Believe. And this morning, we're in part 18. Can you believe it? We have done 18 weeks of this so far. So it's been great. Well, before we get into it, I want to tell you about a job that I had when I was in college in the 90s. I worked for this company called Itronics, and we made ruggedized laptops. The kind of laptops that you would find in the military or fire, police, construction site. These were laptops that I could throw off the stage here and they would be fine. Or I could dunk them in water and they would be okay. And they also could survive extreme temperatures, up to below freezing and even super hot. But looking at these laptops, they all look the same. They had the same logo on them, they had the same case, they had the same color. You couldn't tell a good laptop from a bad laptop, could you? So you'd have to test these. And so what we did is we had this testing chamber, and it would fluctuate the temperature from below freezing all the way to above 120 degrees. So we would load these laptops in there, and we would execute a program on each one that would be running the whole time that they're in this chamber. And then we'd close the door, and about an hour later, we'd come out and we would grab the laptops. And it wasn't until you took them out of the chamber that you opened up the laptop, could you read the screen that did it pass or did it fail the tests. There was no way to tell if the laptop could withstand that kind of pressure unless you put it through some extreme tests. Well, this isn't just a good way of testing a laptop. It's a good way of actually finding out about how true a person is. Now, before you jump to conclusions, I'm not saying we're going to march people into hot and cold chambers, but it is a way of talking about the moment, a moment where conditions become uncomfortable for us. That something will cost us in order for us to stay true to say who we are, to stay to who we say we are. It's that moment that the truth about us actually comes out. It's these pressure moments, right? And they don't happen on our best day, and they certainly don't happen when everything is going great in our favor. The pressure moment, it's the inconvenient moment, isn't it? That's the moment that reveals what you're actually made of. And I want that to sit with everyone for just a moment, because I'm sure everyone in this room has had a moment or two like that. Maybe you're still going through a moment right now. And that moment it's attacking your comfort. It's attacking your reputation, a relationship that's in jeopardy. And so you're going through a moment right now. And that's exactly what our text this morning is going to reveal. John, who wrote his gospel according to John, he's going to describe a situation involving two men. They both are under extreme pressure during almost the same time and the same place. So if you have your Bibles, why don't you open up with me to John chapter 18. We're going to start in verse 1. This is what it says. After saying these things, Jesus crossed the Kidron Valley with his disciples and entered a grove of olive trees. Judas, the betrayer, he knew this place because Jesus had often gone there with his disciples. The leading priests and Pharisees had given Judas a contingent of Roman soldiers and temple guards to accompany him. Now with blazing torches, lanterns, and weapons, they arrived at the olive grove. Now, if this was a Star Wars movie, the music that would be playing right now would be dun, 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 dun. You know, the Imperial March that's iconic when the bad guys are on the screen. Okay, just, maybe I'm the only one, sorry. Verse 4, Jesus fully realized all that was going to happen to him, so he stepped forward to meet them. Who are you looking for, he asked. Jesus the Nazarene, they replied. I am he. Jesus said, Judas, who betrayed him, was standing next to them. As Jesus said, "I am he," they all drew back and fell to the ground. Once more he asked them, "Who are you looking for?" And again they replied, "Jesus the Nazarene." "I told you that I am he," Jesus said. "And since I am the one you want, let the others go." He did this to fulfill his own statement. "I did not lose a single one of those you had given me." Then Simon Peter drew a sword and slashed off the right ear of Malchus, the high priest's slave. But Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into the sheath. Shall I not drink from the cup of suffering the Father has given me?" The garden arrest is a divine moment right here. It's not victimhood. Jesus wasn't caught by the Romans, he was found. And this is really important because Jesus isn't a victim here. He knew what was going to happen, and he chose to come to this exact same place. He chose to come to that garden. He chose to come and address the Roman soldiers and ask them, "Who are you seeking?" Because he wasn't afraid. He handled this situation calmly and peacefully. Unlike Peter, on the other hand, who wasn't so reserved, was he? I've heard Peter described as ready, fire, aim. That's Peter to the core. Because before you know it, he has a sword out and there's an ear off lying on the ground. Two different responses to the same event. Peter showed up armed, Jesus showed up with the truth. So Jesus is arrested now, and he's escorted, him and his disciples, he's escorted to the high priest's house. Let's pick this up in verse 19. Inside, the high priest began asking Jesus about his followers and what he had been teaching them. Jesus replied, "Everyone knows what I teach. I have preached regularly in the synagogues and the temple where the people gather. I have not spoken in secret. Why are you asking me this question? Ask those who heard me. They know what I said." Then one of the temple guards standing nearby slapped Jesus across the face. "Is that the way to answer the high priest?" he demanded. Jesus replied, "If I had said anything wrong, you must prove it. But if I'm speaking the truth, why are you beating me?" So the high priest here, he's putting Jesus under some pressure. He's questioning him. He's interrogating him. But Jesus, his response to all of these questions is calmness and just being very logical. He's not speaking out of fear, but he's speaking out of truth. And what he is saying, the truth that he is saying, the people in the room, they didn't like it. I mean, this sounds kind of like a Jack Nicholson movie, right? You can't handle the truth. Obviously, somebody couldn't because one of the guards slaps him. You see, truth under pressure, it doesn't shrink down to fit the size of the room. It doesn't get quieter to keep the peace, or it doesn't soften itself to avoid a reaction. It simply says what's true, and if the room can't handle it, then it's the room that needs to change. It's people that need to change, not the truth. Jesus, he doesn't provoke the slap because of something he said wrong or something he said that was false. He provoked the slap because what he said was true, and people couldn't handle that without resorting to violence. Well, let's be honest with ourselves. Most of us don't handle pressure as well as Jesus handled this. In fact, we have an example of that in our text here. Let's look at how Peter is handling this exact same evening. We're going to start in verse 15. Now, this is kind of like filmed as like a movie. John is going back and forth between the account of Peter and the account of Jesus. And so verse 15 says this: Simon Peter, he followed Jesus, as did another of the disciples. That other disciple was acquainted with the high priest, so he was allowed to enter the high priest's courtyard with Jesus. Peter had to stay outside the gate. Then the disciple knew who the high priest was, spoke to the woman watching at the gate, and she let Peter in. That woman asked Peter, "You're not one of the man's disciples, are you?" "No," he said, "I am not." Because it was cold, the household servants and the guards had made a charcoal fire. They stood around it, warming themselves, and Peter stood with them, warming himself. Now let's flip over to verse 25 to pick up the second part of what Peter's doing right now. Remember, this is all happening at the exact same time Jesus is being interrogated. Verse 25 says, "Meanwhile, as Peter was standing by the fire warming himself, they asked him again, 'You're not one of the disciples, are you?' He denied it, saying, 'No, I am not.' But one of the household slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, 'Didn't I see you out there in the olive grove with Jesus?' Again, Peter denied it, and immediately a rooster crowed." Two stories happening simultaneously: Jesus' interrogation and Peter's collapse. All happening, or both happening, at the same night in the same courtyard. This morning, I want to drill down specifically to Peter's story, because it's not a dramatic failure that just happened all of a sudden. Peter had 3 encounters being asked a similar question each time, and he had 3 opportunities to speak the truth. So if we're gonna figure out what happened to Peter that night, and ultimately what can happen to us when we're under pressures, then we need to kind of slow down and let's take a look at this step by step. Because in moments like these, they don't just all of a sudden start big, they start small. And the first truth I want to bring to your attention this morning is that fear starts small. Fear starts small. The very first denial, it was by a simple servant girl asking him a question that basically just kind of leads into a response of no. "Aren't you one of the guys that follows that other guy?" "Oh, no, that's not me. You have me mistaken." I mean, it just rolled off of Peter's tongue so easily. There was no threat, there's no interrogation, there's no soldiers that showed up. There was just a simple servant girl, a nobody that asked Peter a question. This is a very low stakes moment right now for Peter, and he folds instantly. And I think what makes this so striking is because at the exact same time Peter is saying, "No, I don't know that man," Jesus is standing before the most powerful religious ruler in all of Jerusalem right now at this moment, and in front of the high priest. He's also standing in front of soldiers, and he's standing in front of guards. And he doesn't flinch. He doesn't soften his words in order to make people feel more comfortable. He doesn't change his story to adapt to the room and to adapt to how people are handling what he's speaking. He simply speaks truth. He says, "I've openly spoken to the world about this. If you want to know what I'm saying, go ask them, because I haven't said any of this in secret." He says this calmly and clearly, so clearly that a guard simply just strikes him on the face. And even when Jesus is struck like that, what does he do? What is his response? He says, "Hey, if I said anything in error, if I said something wrong, then prove it. Tell me what I said wrong." And notice there's no response to that, because Jesus spoke truth and he didn't say anything wrong. He just spoke the truth. The same night, we see 2 opposite responses to pressure. Peter crumbled before a servant girl, and Jesus stood firm. And the difference, it isn't just that Jesus was more brave. It's because he spoke truth. And he spoke truth because that's what he is. He is truth. Jesus, he isn't actually standing on something. He is standing as someone. In chapter 14 of John, we covered this a little while ago, Jesus makes this declaration that says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." I am the way, the truth, and the life. That was an absolute declaration that Jesus made, and it is truthful. No amount of pressure or interrogation or death could change Jesus, change who he is. You see, truth doesn't have to move. It doesn't fold and it doesn't collapse. Jesus is the foundation. And unfortunately, Peter, in this moment where he denied Christ, he didn't have that foundation. Peter was standing in Peter. Peter under pressure is going to move. And Peter's no different than us. If we're standing in ourselves, if the only thing that we are rooted is our own abilities, our own strength, our own knowledge, then fear is going to eventually move us. It's going to happen. We see it all the time around us. And if you're honest with yourself, I know I am. I've seen it in my own life. Because that's what fear does. And that's why this is so important, is because fear, it doesn't come just marching up in front of you, waving a big flag saying, "Here I am." No, what fear does is it sneaks in really quietly and really calm. It does this before the crisis moment. And it shows up in a moment so small that you don't even really register it as that you made a decision. Peter, he didn't feel the weight of what he was doing. He was just answering a question. He was just quickly responding to a servant girl's question that he felt threatened by. And so he just quickly said, "No, that's not me." And before he knew it, Peter had compromised. Maybe you know what this feels like. Maybe not in a courtroom, but maybe just a casual coworker asking you a question and about something, about faith, and you just kind of let the moment slip by. Or maybe this was in a family gathering and someone said something, offended your beliefs or attacked you, and instead of trying to make a scene, instead of trying to make it awkward, you just kind of laughed it off. Maybe there's a conversation that it was easier to remain quiet than it was to be that guy that brings up Jesus' name. It doesn't feel like a denial in the moment. It just feels like not making it a thing. Not going out on a limb, not making yourself vulnerable, protecting yourself. That's exactly what Peter is going through. That's what the first denial was all about. Peter protecting Peter. And the problem is, as we read through the account here, is that one denial doesn't just stay at one, does it? Peter is still at that fire. He's still there with a crowd around him. And what happens next, it shows us something just as important as the first denial. It shows us that fear doesn't stay the same size twice. And my second truth this morning is that fear compounds. Fear compounds. It gets bigger. It doesn't stay the way it was last week, yesterday. The second denial, it came by bystanders. It came by a group around Peter at the fire. The third denial, it came from an eyewitness, somebody that said, "Hey, I know you. You were with that guy." And that's when the stakes climb dramatically for Peter. That's when it's like, "Oh my, I am caught because somebody saw me." Instead of courage rising up to combat pressure in the moment, Peter denies again, almost kind of on reflex. Once again, "Oh no, that's not me. You're mistaken." If the first denial came easy, the second and the third came easier still. And that's the contrast this morning that really should stop us in our tracks and get us to think a little bit. Because while Peter was unraveling at the fire, Jesus, he's standing in front of power. Absolute power Jesus is standing in front of right now. And he's calm, he's clear, he's unshaken. The pressure on Jesus, it's only increasing. Asking more questions, getting struck. Next week we'll start covering when Jesus is delivered to Pilate, and more questions, more interrogation. So the pressure is building this entire time, and Jesus is staying calm. Doesn't move an inch. He doesn't retreat. He doesn't soften. And he doesn't manage the room. He just tells the truth. Same night, opposite responses. Peter getting smaller, and Jesus not moving any at all. And the difference, friends, it's not willpower. It's not that Jesus was holding up because he had something solid to stand on. Jesus is that solid thing. That's who he is. He is that solid thing that you and I can stand on. That's why Jesus held up. You can press him, you can strike him, you can interrogate him, but you're not going to move him. He's not going to shift. It's not that he was so disciplined not to give up ground. It was because Jesus had no ground to lose. He is the truth. Where he is standing is firm. He's not going to change. Now, let's be fair to Peter for just a moment, all right? I've been picking on Peter. We should be a little fair to him. Because this would have been an intense night. He just witnessed the teacher, his Lord, for 3 years be arrested and hauled off. Everybody kind of followed. A bunch of guards were there. Soldiers were there. But no accusation was given. There was no arrest. There was no, this is the charges brought. It was just, come with us kind of thing. So in Peter's mind, man, this could be a purge. This could be, they're coming after us. They're coming after every one of us that's associated with Jesus. So there's absolutely some legitimate fear here. Peter could be thinking anyone standing close to Jesus is gonna be next. And when Peter is standing at the fire, he's not carrying this embarrassment, he is carrying uncertainty. He's not sure how the night's gonna end. He's not sure if he's gonna even make it. And why? Because Peter is still standing on Peter. He's not standing on the rock, on his Lord and Savior that he should have been. You see, uncertainty like this, it doesn't stay contained in the single moment. Because every small surrender to fear, it lowers the price of the next fear. Let me say that one more time. Every small surrender to fear, it lowers the price of the next fear. Every small compromise lowers the price of the next compromise. Every little sin lowers the price of the next sin. Once you do one thing, it gets easier to do it again, doesn't it? It gets easier. The second time, it's always easier than the first. You were quiet once, so the next time, it's almost automatic to be quiet. You've already built a habit of managing moments just like Peter. Peter is managing the moment. He managed the servant girl, now he's managing the crowd, and now he's managing the eyewitness. And he's just going from moment to moment, just trying to stay one step ahead of the accusations, one step ahead of the pressure and the threat. Peter, he was standing in his own instincts, his own strength. And if self is your foundation, then fear can erode that one denial at a time, very, very easily. And that's the story of Peter. Peter, he said 3 times, I don't know who this Jesus guy is. The rooster crows, and everything changes for Peter, doesn't it? Everything changes. Why? Because truth eventually catches up. Third point this morning is truth catches up. That small, little audible rooster crow, that was the turning point for Peter. In Matthew's gospel, in his account, he says that Peter fled from the courtyard after the rooster crowed, and he went and cried bitterly. He was sad. He was broken. He was devastated of what he had just done. Because in a single instant, in a single crow from an animal, everything snapped into focus to Peter. Jesus had predicted this exact event that would happen. He said, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. You're going to deny me 3 times, and then a rooster's going to crow. And now, while Peter is sitting there managing the pressure and one denial after another, Jesus' words are coming true just on cue. His prediction's coming true. You see, the rooster, however, is not the punishment. The rooster isn't the punishment. The rooster is the reminder. It's the alarm bell that just kind of went off and brought everything into focus for Peter. It was a reminder to Peter of what Jesus told him. Jesus told him, you're going to stand in yourself, Peter. That's what you're going to do. And before the rooster crowed, Peter had swung a sword. Peter was courageous. He swung a sword. And he told his Lord, I will die for you. But now, afterwards, Peter is in the dark, crying, weeping bitterly, sorry for what had happened, and just disgusted with his life. He's an absolute wreck right now. Because the truth caught up with him. And the truth showed him exactly where he was standing. You see, Jesus, when he was standing in front of authority, he never once had to manage what he was saying. He never once had to change the story, change the narrative. He didn't once have to back down. He just told the truth. Every word he spoke held up under examination, and there was no moment where his story had to change. You see, when you stand in truth, you don't have to outrun truth. When you tell the truth, when you're genuine, when you're authentic, you don't have to outrun anything. And the rooster doesn't crow. Maybe you've had a rooster moment in your life. I'm not talking about, an audible rooster, but a moment in your life where all of a sudden things happen and you're like, wow, I just now realize the weight of everything that I've been going through, the decisions that I've been making. It all led up to this certain moment, and now it's clear to me what that moment is. Maybe you're a believer, and there's a corner of your life that you just haven't surrendered to God. You're keeping that part of it under your own control. You want to just kind of keep that. And maybe you're afraid that if people find out, or if people learn about this, and you're always afraid of the rooster crowing. Or maybe you're not a believer, and you've been all this time been able to keep Jesus kind of at arm's length. But every encounter with a Christian, or every bulletin board you see, or every something that you see, it's just a little bit of drawing you closer to him. And you keep saying, no, tomorrow. That's tomorrow's problem. I'll worry about him tomorrow. I'm not gonna deal with it today. Either way, that's the rooster. That's the rooster that is trying to get your attention, trying to let you know that, hey, stop being in yourself. Stop standing where you're standing. There's a better place to stand. You see, nobody counts their denials in real time. We don't just sit there, okay, yeah, I did that, We don't do that. They just start happening. We don't keep track of it. And the issue is that truth, it doesn't need you to be paying attention at all. It doesn't need you to be paying attention. It keeps its word whether you're watching or not, and eventually truth will catch up to you. It eventually happens. It happened to Peter. But the beauty of it, the gospel here, is that when it catches up, it shows you that, hey, where you've been standing is not where you have to be standing. It gives you a chance to go pick a different place to stand, and that's my last point this morning, is that we have a different place to stand because truth outlasts power. Absolutely, truth outlasts power. Power struck Jesus, and he stood firm. Fear caught up with Peter, and he fell. Jesus, he knew what was coming. He, in fact, told his disciples these moments would happen. He knew what was going to happen before he even stepped a foot into that garden. And he knew what the full cost of it was. And he continued to do it. Not because the cost didn't matter, but because truth mattered to Jesus. That's what mattered to him. You and I mattered to him. He knew what he needed to do. He knew that the world was worth it to save. You see, truth doesn't negotiate with power. Jesus, if you look at the text here, and the text that we're going to cover in the next few weeks, Jesus doesn't negotiate. He doesn't start wheeling and dealing. He just simply says the truth. Power, it can do whatever it wants. It can do its worst, and truth will always end up standing when it's done. Peter didn't know what was coming, did he? Jesus did predict, Peter, you're going to deny me, but Peter didn't know the events that were happening. Peter, he faced an uncertain but an unarmed threat, and he folded anyway. He surrendered ground that nobody was actually trying to take from Peter. And that's the contrast that John is bringing to our attention this morning, is that it's not this battle between courage and courageousness. It's what happens when power and truth meet against each other. And what happens is truth always holds up. Peter's story, I'll give you a little spoiler alert. It doesn't end at the rooster. In 3 chapters, Jesus is resurrected, and he comes and he meets Peter and he restores Peter. And then if you read in the book of Acts, there's an older Peter that's in Acts. The younger Peter, he caved at a question from a simple girl asking him, do you know this guy? But in Acts, older Peter, he's standing in front of the Sanhedrin, which is a religious group, very legalistic, and they're like, no, you can't preach and teach about Jesus anymore. And Peter says, no way, Jose. We must obey God rather than men. The same kind of pressure, the same kind of power, but a completely different, changed man. Old Peter and new Peter are nothing alike anymore, because the old Peter is now standing on something completely different. And that's what a restored fear looks like. That's what God wants to do in our lives. He wants to restore any fear that we have, any denials, any tribulation. He wants to restore that and show us a better place to stand. It's not about an absence of pressure. That doesn't automatically get taken away. What happens is that we now have a better place to stand in the moments of our pressure. We can stand on ground that's not going to fall away. John, he reveals in this passage a really hard truth, and that's pressure exposes whether we stand firm or fall away. And the reality of that is that we are not going to be able to stand firm on our own. We've got to rely on the strength of Jesus every day. So, I'm going to ask the question that our passage is alluding to. Where are you standing when pressure shows up? Where do you want to stand? And where are you going to stand? Because if you're standing in yourself, fear doesn't need very much to move you. It doesn't. But if you're standing in the one who is truth, the one that walked that night amongst intense pressure in front of the high priest, in front of soldiers and guards, if you stand with him on the ground that he provides, then you're going to be unchanged and unstruck. You're going to have a foundation that's not going to be moved. And folks, we can't manufacture this kind of standing on our own. We can only receive it. I got one takeaway for you this morning, and that's this week. Find the one place you've been managing fear on your own. And instead of handing it to Jesus, and then hand it to Jesus. Hand it over to Jesus. Maybe you're in this room, you're hearing my voice, and you want to know more about how do I hand this over? How do I find a better place to stand? And man, here at Canvas, we would love to answer those questions. We would love to walk through that journey with you. So reach out we have an awesome set of pastors here, staff. I'd love to have a conversation with you after this, but reach out to somebody because there's a better place to stand. If right now you're feeling that, man, the ground is going to come out from underneath me, there's a better place to stand. If you pray, or if you stand, I'd like to pray. Father, thank you for the example of Peter. Thank you that we can relate to someone who loved you very much, and he still stumbled. He still fell. And God, you restored him. You love him. He's with you now in heaven. And we are so grateful for Peter's story. God, we are so thankful for the sacrifice that your son made, the pressure that he stood up to, and the life that he provided for all of us. God, I just ask that realization just changes us. It changes our thinking as we go into our work week, as we go into our work tomorrow, into our school, into wherever we are, that revelation will just absolutely change us. We will not be afraid of hearing a rooster because, God, we want to stand on you in amongst any pressure that comes our way. Thank you for loving us, Lord. We love you. In your name, amen. Thank you for coming out. Hope you guys